Today, the Liberals have introduced the most costly and largest budget deficit in history outside of COVID. The cost of this Liberal budget will drive up the cost of food, housing, and everything else that Canadians buy. And the Prime Minister has broken every single promise he made just 7 short months ago. He promised a $62 billion deficit. He delivered nearly an $80 billion deficit, $16 billion bigger than he promised and twice the size that his predecessor left behind. He promised to lower the debt to GDP ratio. He raised it, and inflation along with it. He promised to spend less. He's spending $90 billion more, costing $5,400 per family in Canada. And that $90 billion, to the Prime Minister's heckles, is above and beyond the promised $16 billion that he says he will one day find. And if he doesn't find them, it will be over $100 billion in brand new spending to respond to the Prime Minister's heckles, Mr.
Hello,
Speaker.
everyone. Welcome back to 45th Perspective. Today, we're going to dive deep into a recent Senate hearing that has been making waves across the nation. This hearing focused on the federal budget, government spending, and the broader implications for our economy and everyday Americans. Senators from across the aisle presented their perspectives, dissecting the government's fiscal priorities, deficits, and promises, and the discussion brought forward a mix of praise, criticism, and caution. Before we get started, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click that notification bell so you never miss our content.
Heckles, Mr. Speaker. He also promised that he would invest more. His own budget document lays out a graph showing that every quarter of this year will see private sector business investment collapse. This costly budget forces Canadians to spend more on debt interest than on healthcare transfers. More than the government collects in GST. That means every dollar the Canadians pay in GST will go to bankers and bondholders instead of to doctors and nurses. All while he raises the industrial carbon tax on farm equipment and fertilizer and therefore food, on steel, concrete, and other industrial projects needed to build homes, a big tax increases on homes and food. And on behalf of all the Canadians who can no longer afford to eat, heat, or house themselves because of Liberal inflation, we Conservatives cannot support this costly Liberal budget.
Is this an austerity budget?
It's hard to tell at this point. What I'll say is it's got a very large deficit. Spending is up in many ways. There are, some record investments, but it also is, cutting public services that Canadians need. There's complex issues that are facing us, and I don't think that we can oversimplify whether policies are going to respond or not. So I'll tell you a few things that we like about the budget. There's $51 billion in infrastructure spending, and that's linked to unionized jobs or community benefit agreements, which requires that work to be done through wage prevailing rates. So that could create good family-sustaining jobs, which has been a priority for the NDP. On the negative side, you have 40,000 public sector job cuts. And when you have a jobs crisis, cutting union, family-sustaining, good jobs is the opposite direction where we want to go. And we have to remember, behind every job is a service. The Canadians really want to wait 6 months to get a passport. You want to wait 3 months to get a call back from CRA. The seniors want to wait to get their old age security checks. These are the kind of real-life consequences of cutting public sector workers there are. I would also point out that Mr. Carney promised Canadians during the election that he would cap the public sector, not cut it. This is not an NDP budget. Okay? This is a Liberal budget. And this is what you get when you elect a Liberal government, is you get cuts to services and you get sacrifices that are to be made by working people, while the richest people in this country are left scot-free. So you see there's positive and negatives in this budget, and we're going to take a comprehensive look and weigh it out in the aggregate.
You're sounding a lot less harsh than any of the other opposition parties, I gotta say. Are you telegraphing you guys are going to vote for this budget or just be absent on budget vote day?
No, we're just more rational maybe than the other parties are. We're not telegraphing anything. I'm a Jack Layton, New Democrat. We came to Parliament to make Parliament work. We want to be propositional, And we want to give this budget the serious once-over that it deserves. And we want to consult with Canadians.
It sounds like you're leaning toward voting no on this budget. Can you explain why?
You have a very good perspective on things. Where did you get that?
Just listening.
I hardly see how, after having met with our caucus tonight, we could vote in favor of this budget. Those $78 billion of deficit, whatever tricks they want to invent. There's nothing of what we did ask in the budget. And I must tell you that what the Bloc Québécois asked in order to maybe support the budget about elders, about healthcare transfers, about what we did ask, but one thing that was not given to Quebecers and given to everybody else would have been good for all Canadians, not only Quebecers. Still, the answer is no. This is a red conservative budget, which Mr. Harper might have signed. And there's nothing for Quebecers in there, absolutely nothing. We did ask what was basically the object of a large consensus with the population of Quebec. And the answer from a Quebecer, Mr. Champagne, is blunt. No.
Do you know if the Liberals are trying to approach anyone from your party to cross the floor?
I'd be quite surprised. We are about as close to Liberals as Quebec is from New Zealand. It's the other side of the world.
As it stands right now, would you vote no on the budget?
Absolutely. There's no way that we can, as Greens, vote yes on this budget. But I want to emphasize there are several days in which this budget can be negotiated and amended before it goes to a vote. And that's something that doesn't get discussed much. I am surprised that Mr. Carney has not reached out, or that more of his ministers haven't reached out to say, what would it take to get Greens to vote for this budget? In the same way I hear from friends in the New Democratic Party, they haven't felt that there's been an effort to get us on side early on. So we are now in a position where I think every vote's going to matter, every vote's going to count, and I would invite the Prime Minister, and I've sent this message through the officials who were with us in the lockup, please let them know I'd like to talk, because there's some things that could be done that would make it possible for us to vote for this budget.
Mr. Speaker, he also
Now let's get into the hearing. At the heart of this discussion was the federal budget, which has been described as historically large, with a deficit that has drawn criticism from many corners. According to the figures presented, the deficit this year is projected to be nearly $80 billion, which is significantly higher than the promises made during the last election cycle. To put that in perspective, that's roughly $16 billion more than what the administration had initially committed to. The senators debated not just the numbers, but the broader consequences of this spending, how it will affect inflation, the cost of living, and the long-term health of our economy. Conservative voices were particularly vocal during this hearing, highlighting what they see as a pattern of broken promises. They pointed out that the government had pledged to reduce the deficit, control inflation, and spend more prudently, but the reality of the numbers seems to contradict these promises. According to the Conservatives, the budget not only falls short of these pledges, but also introduces additional spending that will burden American families. They argued that, beyond the immediate deficit, the budget imposes higher costs on everyday essentials like housing, food, and utilities. They framed it as a situation where hardworking Americans will be footing the bill for the government's ambitious spending plans while seeing minimal benefits in return. One of the most striking points raised was the comparison between debt servicing and federal services. Conservatives noted that under this budget, the interest on government debt is projected to exceed spending on critical services like healthcare transfers. In other words, the money Americans pay in taxes, particularly through mechanisms like the federal sales tax or other levies, will increasingly go to service debt rather than directly support hospitals, doctors, teachers, or essential public programs. This perspective resonates with anyone who is concerned about the long-term fiscal responsibility of the federal government and the sustainability of current spending patterns. There was also a lot of discussion about tax policy during the hearing. The Conservatives raised concerns about new industrial taxes, including carbon-related taxes on certain sectors like agriculture and construction materials. They warned that these taxes would not just affect corporations but would inevitably trickle down to everyday Americans, driving up the prices of food, building materials, and housing. This argument touches on a broader principle that many Americans care deeply about: the idea that government policy should not inadvertently increase the cost of living for average families. From their perspective, policies that sound beneficial in theory, such as environmental or green initiatives, can have real-world consequences if they are implemented without careful consideration of economic impact. On the other side of the aisle, some senators acknowledged these concerns but also highlighted the potential benefits embedded in the budget. For instance, the budget includes substantial infrastructure spending, amounting to roughly $51 billion, which is intended to support unionized jobs and projects that adhere to wage standards. This is the kind of spending that, in theory, creates sustainable, family-supporting employment and stimulates economic activity in local communities. Senators sympathetic to this view argued that while the deficit is large, there are tangible investments being made that could drive growth, improve public infrastructure, and support communities. However, there was a balancing act noted by some senators. While infrastructure and targeted investments were praised, cuts to public sector jobs were also highlighted. The proposed budget includes approximately 40,000 public sector job reductions. Critics emphasize that behind every public sector job is a service that Americans rely on, whether it's processing Social Security checks, responding to tax inquiries, or handling passport applications. Reducing these jobs could mean longer wait times and diminished access to essential services, which, in turn, affects ordinary citizens directly. This tension between investing in infrastructure and cutting public sector positions was a recurring theme throughout the hearing, illustrating the complexity of fiscal decision-making. It was interesting to see the responses from smaller or more issue-focused parties. For example, certain environmental-focused senators, while critical of the deficit and cuts to services, indicated that there might still be room for negotiation. They suggested that if specific amendments were considered or certain priorities were addressed, they could potentially support parts of the budget. This highlights an important procedural aspect of budget politics. Even if the headline figures are controversial, there is often room for adjustment, negotiation, and compromise before final approval. It's a reminder that the budget process is iterative and that every vote counts. Meanwhile, regional-focused senators, like those representing particular states or provinces, expressed dissatisfaction with how the budget addressed or failed to address their constituents' needs. Some criticized the budget for leaving key programs unfunded or underfunded for their regions, pointing out that promises made to specific areas were not fulfilled. They emphasized that a national budget should account for regional disparities and ensure that all Americans, regardless of where they live, benefit from federal investments. This criticism underscores the fact that even a well-intentioned budget can face pushback if it is perceived as uneven or unfair in its allocation of resources. From a right-leaning patriotic perspective, there are several points worth emphasizing. First, fiscal responsibility is paramount. While investments in infrastructure and critical programs are important, they must be balanced against the long-term debt burden. America has historically been a nation that values self-reliance, prudent spending, and accountability. When a government continues to run massive deficits without clear plans to manage them, it raises legitimate concerns about the economic future of everyday citizens. Second, transparency and honesty in government promises are crucial. Breaking campaign or policy pledges, particularly regarding spending and deficit reduction, undermines public trust and the credibility of elected officials. Voters have a right to expect that commitments made during elections are honored. At the same time, it's essential to recognize that not all spending is inherently bad. Investments that directly benefit communities, create jobs, and stimulate economic growth can be positive, even if they contribute to short-term deficits. The key question is whether these investments are strategic, targeted, and sustainable, or whether they are broad, unfocused, and likely to exacerbate long-term financial instability. This is where careful analysis and a discerning approach are critical. We should evaluate not just the size of the deficit but the nature of the spending and the real-world outcomes it is likely to produce. The hearing also shed light on the political dynamics behind budget approval. Opposition parties, whether conservative, regional, or issue-focused, play an essential role in scrutinizing the budget. Their critiques, while sometimes partisan, provide a check on government power and ensure that multiple perspectives are considered. From a citizen standpoint, it is encouraging to see debates that probe the implications of budgetary decisions rather than simply rubber-stamping spending plans. It demonstrates that democracy functions through scrutiny, discussion, and debate. Beyond the immediate numbers, there is a broader cultural and economic implication. Massive deficits and unchecked spending contribute to inflation, which directly impacts the purchasing power of ordinary Americans. When citizens see prices rising for essential goods and services, frustration grows, and faith in government stewardship diminishes. This is not just a financial issue, it's a social one. Families need to be able to plan, save, and live without the constant pressure of rising costs driven by government policies. From a patriotic standpoint, ensuring economic stability and protecting the livelihoods of working Americans is a core responsibility of any administration. One of the more nuanced points in the hearing was the tension between long-term investment and short-term fiscal restraint. Some senators argued that deficit spending can be justified if it funds projects that generate future economic returns, such as infrastructure that improves efficiency, transportation, or technology. Others, however, stressed the danger of expanding debt without clear mechanisms for repayment or growth. This debate strikes at the heart of what it means to govern responsibly, balancing immediate needs with the future prosperity of the nation. It's also important to recognize that the hearing provided insight into the negotiation process. Several senators expressed openness to amendments and revisions, indicating that the budget is not a fixed document, but rather a living proposal subject to change. This is a critical aspect of governance that is often overlooked in media coverage. The ability to engage, negotiate, and adjust is what allows the legislative process to address concerns and improve outcomes for citizens. For viewers watching at home, it's a reminder that even if a budget seems flawed at first glance, there are avenues for meaningful improvement. From a right-wing perspective, the hearing reinforces several principles. First, accountability is non-negotiable. Politicians must be held responsible for the promises they make and the impact of their policies. Second, taxpayers' dollars must be managed prudently. Overspending, even with good intentions, has real consequences for families, communities, and the nation's long-term stability. Third, strategic investment matters. Spending that creates jobs, supports essential services, and strengthens the economy can be positive, but it must be carefully planned and targeted to avoid waste or unintended consequences. Finally, citizen engagement is vital. Public input, debate, and scrutiny are essential in shaping budgets that reflect the values and needs of the people. For Americans concerned about fiscal policy, this hearing offers several takeaways. It illustrates the challenges of balancing competing priorities, the tension between investment and austerity, and the complexities of modern governance. It also highlights the importance of vigilance and advocacy. Citizens should not passively accept government spending. Instead, they should pay attention, ask questions, and demand transparency. By understanding the details of the budget and the arguments for and against it, we can better hold elected officials accountable and ensure that our nation remains strong, prosperous, and fair. In closing, this Senate hearing reminds us that the health of our democracy depends not just on what is spent, but on how, why, and with what accountability it is spent. Every dollar in deficit, every tax increase, and every cut to essential services has consequences that ripple through households and communities. As patriotic Americans, it is our responsibility to pay attention, demand honesty and transparency, and ensure that our leaders prioritize the interests of hardworking families over short-term political gain or experimental policies. I want to hear what you think. How do you feel about the budget discussions presented in this hearing? Do you believe the government is striking the right balance between investment and fiscal responsibility? Or do you think these deficits and spending priorities put ordinary Americans at risk? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's have a respectful discussion about the future of our nation and the choices our leaders make on our behalf. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, like, Subscribe and support 45th Perspective on Patreon at patreon.com/45th Perspective. Your support allows us to continue analyzing important political issues, breaking down complex hearings, and presenting perspectives that put the American people first. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video as we continue to explore the issues that matter most to our country, our communities, and our families.